Hello, everyone. I'm Joshua Cameron. I'm the Policy and Legislation Chair of the Democratic Party of Sacramento County, and tonight we are doing SacDems 101, specifically Resolutions 101, Power Through Policy, writing resolutions for the Democratic Party of Sacramento County. Resolutions shape the official voice of the DPSC and are the main vehicle where we advocate for issues affecting Sacramento County. This presentation covers drafting standards, procedural boundaries, sponsorship rules, and the path from draft to official party position. So, why resolutions matter? The main reason they matter is because resolutions are the primary tool for the Central Committee to establish formal positions on specific local and state related state issues. And by the way, everything here also applies if you're a club as well and you pass resolutions to substitute DPSC for the name of your organization. An adopted resolution allows the DPSC to speak with a unified voice to elected officials, the media, and to the public at large. They highlight specific issues specific to Sacramento County that may be overlooked at the state or national level. That's a really big one. Probably the main reason we exist and pass resolutions on the local level is to draw attention to local issues that the state and national party just don't have the expertise or just frankly knowledge of. So that's why we're here, actually. So that's a really big one. And platform alignment, and they help refine and apply the broad values of the Democratic Party to specific local challenges. So as I'll get into a little bit, I like to say resolutions take a broader policy that we have in our platform. So the platform's still important, but the platform tends to speak more broadly. It tends to say build a bridge or build bridges. And a resolution would say build the I Street Bridge. So that's the example I like to give. So, but it's important that the two be aligned as much as possible. So let's start with the basic path. So first it starts with submission. So if you author a resolution, and you must be a DPSC member to author a resolution, if not, find a DPSC member willing to submit it. The author submits the resolution to the Policy and Legislation Committee of the DPSC. That's the committee with jurisdiction over policy resolutions at least 1 week before the meeting. The Policy and Legislation Committee will vet the resolution for format and policy compliance and forward it to the executive board with or without recommendation. There might be times it doesn't get forwarded for rare reasons, if it's like in gross non-compliance or just needs a lot more revision. There might be times it may take an extra month, but most of the time, assuming everything's written correctly, and we'll go over the standards in a minute, it will be forwarded either with or without a recommendation. The executive board will review the committee's work and recommendation, and including the resolution, and it will forward to the full Central Committee membership with or without a recommendation. The Central Committee, the general membership of the body, will hear the proposal and with some limited debate if it's not on a consent calendar. Some oftentimes they will be passed without debate because they'll be on what's called a consent calendar. I didn't include that there, but if there is debate, it will be some debate, and then there will be a yes or no vote on the resolution. And if it passes, congratulations. If not, feel free to come back to the policy committee and we can try to see if we can work something out. Next is, here's what a resolution can and cannot do. This is very important. What a resolution can do is express a statement of belief. So it declares the party's values and convictions on public matters. It advocates and supports policy changes, especially legislation. And then down below, specifically, the third one, stated stance on legislation, is just kind of a subcategory of the second one, support policy. But basically, it's taking a position on a policy or at times a statement of belief on this is what we feel about the world, or here's what we think the world should look, or the local area should look like. Or now what it cannot do is it cannot change the party bylaws or rules. There's a very specific process for that. I used to be the rules chair too, so feel free to reach out to the chair of DPSC. If you present one of these to the committee, I'll be glad to talk to you about how that actually works, but not in this committee. It cannot endorse specific candidates. It cannot speak or commit for other organizations. We are only authorized to pass resolutions that state the DPSC believes this or calls for this or supports this. So any resolution that does not say Democratic Party of Sacramento County in the resolve clause is not proper by definition. Though we can, if we really believe in the resolution, just scratch out that organization's name and put our own. But we're only allowed to pass resolutions in our own name, is what that's saying. And also, it can't deal with internal administrative tasks. Those get sent to the executive board. So here are some of the technical standards according to our committee rules and the DPSC rules more broadly. The resolution must fit on a single 8.5 by 11 page. Since this is the US and not Europe, we use imperial and not metric unit, so it's 8.5 by 11. So you don't get around that rule by using a European A4 or A5 page. So until we adopt the metric system, that's what it is. It can be a maximum of 400 words, including the title. So no long-winded titles, because it will count towards the limit. It must be in 12-point font and must be typed with no hyperlinks. Oh, sorry, going back on that. Why am I sorry about that. I don't know. It doesn't let me go back, so I gotta actually start over. Here we go. 12-point font, no hyperlinks. It must be typed. And then there's only one, and this is, I consider, the most important rule. There can only be one period in the entire document, and that's at the very, very end of it, in the final, after the final resolve clause. And yes, we do check for that. Now, the title is important too. Um, the title should be a short but descriptive title. It should state this is what we're calling for in a few words. So it's like a very, very brief summary of the overall resolution. It's stating what the thing is, what the position in the underlying resolution is. So, for example, supporting increased affordable housing. That would be a very brief description of the underlying resolution, and the resolution is basically fleshing that out. And note it must be in a present participle. So a present participle would be supporting, opposing, calling for, or anything with an ing ending. Because we want to be more in the active voice. It frames the parties out. And no numbering. We do have numbering for our resolutions, but the committee will take care of that. So just submit it with a title. And please include it with an ing. The very first word should end in ing. Is just keep that in mind. The whereas clauses. So there is actually one more requirement I didn't go over, and that is there are a maximum of 3 whereas clauses and a maximum of 2 resolve clauses. So the first is the whereas clauses. This is how I recommend authors go about structuring their whereas clauses. Together, the whereas clauses are called a preamble. So these are often called preamble clauses as well. But the way I usually write resolutions is I start with the problem. So state the specific issue or challenge in Sacramento County, identify the problem clearly and concisely so readers immediately understand the concern. The second is the context. So either describe the history of the issue or the parties' existing position on the issue. If we've already spoken about the issue in the platform, just not specifically, so let's go back to my bridges example. Let's say our platform calls for building more bridges, which we are working on an infrastructure plan. Stay tuned. That's a broader statement of policy. That's fine. And now you have a resolution calling for the supporting the I Street Bridge. You would want to reference that underlying policy in the platform if there is such an underlying policy. Or sometimes you may just want to describe the history of the problem that's affecting Sacramento County as well. So you can do either or, maybe even a bit of both. But I would say number 2, whereas number 2 is really the context. And then 3 would be the policy itself. State the proposed policy to solve the problem and try to make it in frame it in concrete and actionable terms that lead naturally to the resolve clauses. So the clauses should end, and by the way, the clauses should always end in a semicolon and provide facts, not legal conclusions. So as facts are better than opinions as well. So basically give the factual background as much as possible so we have a very solid basis if we want to pass the resolution. You're basically in the whereas clauses, you're justifying the underlying resolve clause, which we're at right now, the call to action. This is where your resolution, this is the most important part of the entire resolution. This is the resolution of the resolution. This is what makes it the resolution. It's the main clause stating the policy and legislation committee support for the policy, the one that you mentioned in whereas number 3. This is the core of the resolution. This is the thing. This is the actual resolution. You can have a resolution without a whereas clause, but you can't have a resolution without a resolved clause. But not vice versa. You can't have whereas clauses without a resolved clause, but you can the other way. So this is the most important thing. In fact, I didn't write this down, but I recommend starting with the resolve clause itself. Write out the resolve clause, the policy that you want the DPSC to take, and then draft the whereas clause to lead up to that. But I would actually recommend starting by writing resolve number 1. And you also have a second resolve clause, which is optional, that calls for further action, like send a letter to these legislators, or support a day of action or something like that. But number 1 is mandatory. It must have at least one resolve clause. The second is optional. But always start with the resolved and then write the preamble later. The whereas clauses later. And by the way, emphasize the most important rule: the final resolve clause ends with the only period in the whole resolution. I keep emphasizing that. Must have that period at the end. And only at the end. So sponsors, authorship and sponsorship. So up to 2 DPSC members may be listed as authors. So in practice, usually it's 1. The Policy and Legislation Committee will note them at the bottom of the resolution. So we'll take care of that. You can have as many sponsors as you want, and they can be either DPSC members or chartered Democratic clubs as well. Any non-party member or non-party organization can't be a sponsor under our rules, but sometimes we may say they support the resolution as well, but not sponsor it. The negotiator is basically the main author. If there is only one author, by definition, they are the negotiator. Must provide their name, email, and phone number so the committee can negotiate with that person. And that leads to the second point. This person is the only individual authorized to negotiate with the committee regarding any language changes. Very important. We need to know who to speak to. So pending legislation is a little stricter in its requirements. So when we are supporting or opposing a piece of legislation, be it a bill in the legislature or an ordinance, the resolution must state the position clearly that we support, and the positions available, at least in the legislature, are support, oppose, support if amended, oppose unless amended, Or occasionally there is a kind of a compromise called concern, which is saying we're not opposed to it, but we have some issues, author, we'd like to talk to you about. That's a concern. Um, so, but whatever the position is, it must very clearly be stated in the resolve clause of the resolution. And there can be no ambiguity where we actually stand on the legislation itself, because the legislature in particular is very, very particular on that point. They want to know exactly what the organization sending them the letter stands on it. And also, if it's, say, oppose unless amended or support if amended, the resolution also needs to be very clear what changes we're asking for the bill itself. So again, no ambiguity here. We want to make it very, very clear to legislators. They're very busy, they're very serious people, and we're very serious people. Make it very clear. And the committee can help you out as well. If you've never written one before on legislation, we're pretty experienced on that, so feel free to reach out. The letter. Now, this is where the second resolve clause kind of becomes mandatory, where you must designate in the second resolve clause that a letter is to be sent and who is authorized to send it, usually the chair of the DPSC, or the language we often use is the chair of the DPSC or their designee is authorized to send the letter. So it ensures here's who's responsible for actually transmitting it. The preamble. The whereas clauses in legislative resolutions often used to describe the specific contents and provisions of the bill being addressed rather than the broader kind. So it is a little more technical of a resolution than typical resolutions are. Yeah, they're not broader statements of belief. They're very specific. Like, this is the bill. This is what we support about. This is how it's consistent with our platform, or this is how it conflicts with our platform, or here's the specific issue that might cause a conflict. And then so if I had to say it this way, I'd say the first whereas clause would again would state the legislation. The second resolve would state our party's existing position on the underlying issue of the subject matter of the legislation. And the third would begin to describe what we need, whether we support or oppose, or what we want to begin to see. These are more technical, so always reach out to us. These are much more demanding than regular resolutions, so please send these more in advance, ideally. So the summary is: submit via an online form at least 1 week, and if there legislation, maybe even a little bit earlier than 1 week. Earlier the better on those. Be sure the title, the first word of the title is a present participle, i.e. ends and then ing, supporting, opposing, urging. Verify the word count is under 400 words, or exactly 400 words is fine as well, but no more than 400. Scrub all periods except the final one. Again, very, very, basically a resolution is one giant sentence. Think of it that way. Use semicolons between the clauses. And also be sure you list the person who's authorized to negotiate with the committee, including their name, their email, and their phone number. And if you pass all five, your resolution is ready to be considered by the Policy and Legislation Committee. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Don't have any.
Hello? I don't know if Lee, I don't know if there are any questions.
Josh, can you un unshare?
Well, I
Okay.
guess if we are going to be like, if I'm going to create my own someday, if
Yeah.
I am going to, there will be someone who's hopefully going to be able to help, right? So,
Yeah, so you've got Josh available, you have me available. Um, Reach out to either one of us. I've
Yeah.
written many, many, many resolutions, and Josh is just so proud of me that
And
I.
I've rewritten many of her resolutions.
okay, sounds good.
Yeah, just reach out to either of us. I might, oh yeah, I guess, maybe share my contact info in a follow-up email for this. But my email is, I actually forgot my own party email. I'm embarrassed. So let me check. I think it's Joshua at sacdems.org or policy at sacdems.org. Let me
It's
double check.
policy at sacdem dot
Policy at sacdems.org. Send an
Policy.
email at sacdems.org. If you have any questions, feel free to follow up. And if it's more involved, I'll even share my number by email and we can talk. But yeah, the committee's always here to work with authors. So,
Sounds
okay, thank you. Anything else? Any other questions? Rosella, do you have any questions? Lee, do you have any questions?
well, actually, yeah, kind of.
Okay, perfect. Good.
So for the resolutions, um, we've also discussed that um they wind up going on the on our platform. So can you kind of go over how a resolution becomes part of the platform?
I omitted that deliberately because we still have not worked that out the exact relationship between the two.
Okay,
But
but
broadly, I'll broadly speak to this point though. In practice, right now, resolutions elaborate existing platform positions because our platform positions tend to be broadly written. Because we only have so much room in our platform. The resolutions are there to spell it out in much more detail. You have a full page in the resolution. You have one line in the in the platform, basically to state your policy. Um, so it has to be broader by its nature. Um, if if the resolution is speaking on a matter where our platform is silent, first I would suggest if our local platform is silent, look to see if the state or even national platforms speak on the issue. If they speak on the issue and they're broadly consistent with what you're calling for, you're good to go. Just reference them. I do that all the time. because our local platform, and this could be its own presentation on the platform, which I may do one day. Our local platform is there to elaborate on, specifically on the state platform, what it doesn't talk about that is of local importance, but too broad for a resolution. It elaborates the platform, the state and to a degree national one. If all the levels of the platform, the state, the national, and the local are all silent on the issue, that's still something we have not really decided on in the committee, and we need to have that debate one day, whether or not we can speak on something where the platform is silent. There is some debate, though I very, very strongly argue, based on how the rules work, that we can't pass a resolution that conflicts with the platform. If the platform's silent, it's a different matter, but we've had many tense debates on this in committee. But I would say, based on if we adopt a platform, we can't then just adopt a resolution that conflicts with it. But there are varying schools of thought on that. But that's my personal school of thought on it. I would I would contact the author and urge them to change it, or at least until there's no conflict. But if it's silent, yeah, I would say it might be okay. We haven't really passed one yet where the platform, usually I try to find something that justifies it in one of those platforms, and usually we can. Our platforms are very broad in this party. We speak on a lot of issues in our state and national platforms. So usually we can find something. Very rarely is there something where we are completely silent on, but if so, we may just have to take it as it goes. It just hasn't happened yet in committee. We have had them where they've conflicted. We've never had one yet well, as long as I've chaired the committee, where the platform is silent. Usually I try to find something in one of those. I'll work with the author. I'll say, yeah, I found this clause in this national platform that speaks somewhat on this. So let's just pass it based on that and call it a day. So hope that answers your, if you have any other questions as well, I'll be glad to hear them. Hopefully that answered yours. To be decided. To be decided. We have not officially settled that question yet on whether the platform's. We usually just urge the author to please present resolutions, certainly ones that are consistent with the platform, but at least where the platform kind of speaks on those are much easier to pass. If the platform is already clear on it and we're just saying, hey, we already support all this great stuff nationally, let's just do it locally, we're on very firm ground at that point. We try not to pass issues of first impression, but again, we haven't really dealt with that as long as I've chaired the committee. So again, to be decided. And I think Rosella has a question.
Yep.
Yes. So my question is, can anybody write a resolution? So for example, as an ex officio member or an alternate, is that, or do you have to actually be a member to write one?
You can be an alternate, you can be an ex officio, you can be an associate member, but you do have to be one of the classes of members in the membership. But it's like if you really have your heart set on writing a reso, you can always just become an associate member and then introduce it. So we've had that before. And we've had alternates and club reps and club alternates present them too. So we're pretty broad on that. But yes, you do have to be at least one category, at minimum, an associate member or higher to author it. Now, if you're none of those and you have no process, I don't know why you wouldn't be able to at least become an associate, but let's say it's possible. Then try to find somebody willing to submit it on your behalf. They become the author, though. We would negotiate with that person. But the only time that I could ever see that happen is if a non-Democrat wanted us to pass something, which at first I would say become a Democrat, then and become an associate member, and then we'll talk to you. But if it's really that big of a deal, find a DPSC member, because there might be people in the DPSC sympathetic. But usually just become the easiest way is just become an associate member and you're good to go. Now you can't vote for it on the floor, just so you know, or in the committee, because you're not. You can't be an associate member, be a member of the committee if you're appointed, but it's pretty much in the if I had that slide back up where I'm going from submission to committee to executive board. Once it's in the committee process, it's kind of on its own track at that point. Then the wheels are in motion. Technically the committee could actually go ahead and approve it even if you want to withdraw it. I didn't mention that in there, but once you submit it, the committee can say, yeah, we want to speak on this, even if you want to withdraw it, or you can remove your name from it. I didn't want to go into too many details tonight, but yeah, just become an associate member is the easiest way and go from there.
So